Hi, Gavin.
Hi, Louie.
And hi, listeners.
Yes, hello. Welcome to our spooky boudoir. It's a study.
Your spooky boudoir?
Spooky boudoir.
My boudoir is always very spooky, but for like different reasons.
I do try and keep it cobweb free. It's not always easy.
Because you're old.
So, Louie.
Anyway, welcome to the Mixed Reviews. We're a movie/film podcast about movies and film.
The cinema. Yes. Mm-hmm. We clearly take ourselves very seriously.
Right.
And if you are not a fan of the cinema,
get the fuck out.
Yeah, just go.
I don't know if you guys can notice this, but Gavin's drinking, but I'm not.
I'm not drinking.
I'm not drinking at all because I've been wasted this entire weekend.
So this is Halloween weekend, by the way. Yeah. We're trying to get this episode out to you while it's still spooky times. Uh-huh. But we realize the planning is perhaps not the greatest, and this might end up being like our November 1st episode. But still.
You can blame that on Gavin.
Yeah, blame that on... Wait, what?
Blame it on the rain.
Blame it on the... Oh. It's very rainy.
It's very rainy in New York. Oh my god.
This was not the right day for me to find out I have a hole in my shoe. But,
And yet...
Small blessings. So, Louie, before we get into this week's topic, which, if you've read the episode description, you already know what it is, but we'll hold you in suspense just a little longer.
Suspenseful. I love that.
Oh, we have some old business to get to.
We do have some old business. Last episode, we talked about witches.
Witches.
Wow.
Yeah, well, my mom does an incredible witch laugh, and if I can get her to do it over the phone, which I have done before to impress friends.
To impress friends?
To impress friends.
Wow.
You don't...
Your friends are cool, huh?
You clearly don't hang out with the right crowd.
Right. I don't. I really don't.
Maybe I'll slide in the episode. I'm not going to do that to my mom. But my mom does have a very impressive witch laugh. I'll give her that.
I believe you.
Well, thank you.
So we asked you to go to our Twitter and vote for what your favorite... movie about witches or features witches in, and Gavin's pick, Bell, Book, and Candle, got 8%.
Yeah, it's the clear loser.
Clear loser. Like, that's what you get for trying to be, like...
You know, I try. I work really hard. I work all day. I come home to this. Ungrateful people.
I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that's my eyes, like, rolling into the back of my skull and retreating.
It's actually pretty impressive. But yeah, go watch Bell, Book, and Candle, I guess is all I can say to that one. Read the rest of the poll, Louie.
The Craft came in at 21%. Other also came in at 21%, and my pick, Hocus Pocus, came in at 50%.
Yeah, it got the most votes.
The clear winner.
Yes, clearly pandering to the crowd.
I mean, honestly, I can't help that I like things that are fun, and that other people think is also fun, so...
That's right, make witches great again. Donald Trump over here.
How dare you? Oh my god. How dare you sully the name of Hocus Pocus like this?
What were some of the other suggestions that we got? Because we definitely got a couple.
We did. We got, someone said Halloween Town.
Yes.
Someone, said The Witch, right?
Yeah, somebody did say The Witch. And, my friend Todd, who lives in California, said Suspiria.
Yeah, someone did say Suspiria.
Yeah, that's right. So, very excited about that.
I can't find any of our replies right now because I'm bad at Twitter.
Yeah, you are.
I really, really am.
So I guess that covers our last week's thing. If you liked our show about witches, feel free to tell us, by the way. It seemed to get a really positive response. So good. I'm just curious as to, I'm always curious as to what draws people and what doesn't draw people, and that episode seemed to draw. So
it's
hey,
like the episodes when I record with my pants off.
Yeah, people seem to I like that.
It just brings the energy up.
It really does. But we'll get to this week's topic, and this week's topic was actually a suggestion from a listener. Yeah. And this week's topic is
Universal Monsters. And this is we've gotten some suggestions for a couple of episodes, but this one seemed really timely.
It did, yeah.
And also this was kind of like a opportunity for us to kind of go back into older movies like we did with Joan Crawford, and that was a really fun episode. So I know you had a proverbial leg up.
Yes.
On this.
I mean, I've always got that leg up. Just always here. I'm here.
Because you're 80 years old.
Yes.
So you were there when these movies came out.
Yes.
Right.
Also true. No, I have been a huge fan of the Universal Studios monster movies. This all goes back to my teenage years when my friend Tim would bring me down to his basement.
Ooh, and, Tim, got the moves?
Yeah, no, I mean, he would just do it to make other people as weird as him. And, got it. Yeah. And, he succeeded. And
here you are today.
Exactly. And, I've been he had all of them on VHS. In fact, I remember at one point attempting to draft up a document which said if he died mysteriously, I would receive them all.
Wow.
But, like, that's a dead format now, so what would I even do with all those VHSs? And also, Tim's dead.
I was waiting for it.
But
Tim, rest in peace, sweetie.
R.I.P.
This podcast episode goes out to you.
I'm pouring one out, but not I'm just pouring it into my mouth.
Right. Let me pour one out into my mouth.
Into my mouth.
For Tim.
Now I'm going to waste this sherry.
Not for Tim. Not for Tim.
And all that sort of culminated when last year I was asked on a friend's podcast. A friend of mine used to do this podcast called I Do Movies Badly, which is, I believe, on a hiatus. It might be on a permanent hiatus. I don't think he's decided yet. Where he asked me to come in and talk about Universal Studios monsters. And that was a lot of fun. And I was apparently the most controversial guest he had.
Oh my God.
Because I come from the critique school where the critic is allowed to critique the film.
What?
And some people in his audience tend to believe that, like, you can only 100% believe directorial intent and only the directorial intent that's been published. The one thing that I like about the Universal Studio, or one of the many things I like about the Universal Studios monsters, is there's a very apparent queer reading of a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a huge no-no with some purists, which I don't understand.
Ew.
Yeah, and so
I don't think so, honey. Not on this podcast.
Exactly. So you're gonna get some queer readings.
And now a reading from the queers. So it's my turn to do the rewind.
So let's move into that.
Let's go! Just a quick note.
Yes.
We talked about this a little bit. There's a lot of history here with not only these specific movies, but Universal Studios. And so
I was gonna say this one presents its own unique problem, and I know I feel like I say that every week, but like this one is so entwined to the history of Universal,
right?
Which is an interesting thing because we're essentially talking about a film company whose job it is to make money,
right?
And like a lot of the decisions were based on that and everything, and also like, I don't know, that there's a lot of people involved in a film studio. It's, you know, when we cover an actor or even when we cover like adaptations by Stephen King, it's still like you're able to narrow it down to like a couple people.
Right.
This is a much broader topic.
It's, some might say this topic's a monster. I'm stupid. Gavin, please fill in the blanks.
Yes, I will do my best to...
Listeners, do not at me if I get something wrong or miss something out.
Same with me. As I've said, I've been a huge fan. I have a ton of books. I've read a ton of stuff about this, but this is the one I'm the most nervous about doing the rewind for because I'm nervous we'll get some things wrong. So if we do get some things wrong, just be polite about it. That's all. You can correct us all you want.
Just be polite when you're doxing me. Okay, guys? In the 1920s, Universal Studios, I'm reading from, a article from the AV Club by Heath, Phipps. And it's, Universal Studios enjoyed a lot of success in the 1920s, with movies featuring monsters, murder, and the macabre. In the 30s, though, was when it really blew up. I'd say in the 20s, the first movie that they did was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, right?
Right, which is funny because it's not traditionally a monster story.
The studio was founded by Carl Laemmle, a German Jewish immigrant who was devoted to his family. Once he had fought for the little man in the picture business, fought and won. Now his son was being groomed to take over the studio, which employed something like 70 relatives. Laemmle was not an educated man, but he employed a secretary who was. He made Irving Thalberg the head of the studio at 21, and he wasn't even a relative. Thalberg produced for Laemmle an epic. Directed by Wallace Worsley, The Hunchback was just another well-made historical drama. The reason no one who saw it ever forgot it was due to Lon Chaney. Quasimodo was a monster, but just as Victor Hugo had shown him as a human being, so did Chaney.
a lot of that comes from the makeup Lon Chaney, who was the lead actor. Was
Lon Chaney, who's like a monster makeup artist. Yeah. They all knew how to beat him up.
Exactly. He garnered the name The Man of a Thousand Faces much later in his life. And, he really, he would torture himself. For The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he built an eyepiece that covered, and it a body brace that twisted his body and his leg almost completely around so he could walk with a limp. When he did, Phantom of the Opera, he, built these devices that would keep his eyes open the entire time.
I saw a documentary called Monster Madness, and someone mentioned that Lon put walnuts under, on his face and put, a skin, makeup over it, so it looked like he was bulging out of his face for Hunchback. So, crazy things. This guy was a great actor and also a great makeup artist.
So that's 1923. So that's the era of silence.
Right. And then in 1931 is that the first when Dracula comes out, right?
Yeah, both Dracula and Frankenstein actually come out in 1931.
Right. Frankenstein came out 9 months after Dracula.
Yeah.
And that was in large part because of Carl Laemmle, right?
Yeah, Carl Laemmle Jr.
Was he 21 when he decided to produce this movie?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
You know what's fun about nepotism? Everything.
Right. Again, from this documentary that I saw, this woman, she was just Carl Laemmle Jr., he really just, had the nerve and guts to be like, no, we should really, put this on the screen and wanted to make bigger, more, elaborate, these big, huge blockbuster movies. And it totally paid off because, these movies just, blew up and, Dracula was actually on Broadway.
Yes.
And they got, I knew his name, Bela Lugosi?
Yeah, Lugosi.
I'm so sorry. Lugosi.
Exactly.
It's not Lugosi.
His name was Bela Lugosi. Now that's the correct way of pronouncing it. But that was probably a little bit too much for people to take. And so he became immortalized under the name of Bela Lugosi.
And he actually played Dracula on stage, and they just brought him over to do the movie version as well.
As well as basing itself on the play's script, the film also took on the play's Broadway lead, a Hungarian actor called Bela Lugosi.
I am Dracula.
A veteran of Budapest's leading theatres, Lugosi's American career had previously been limited by his accent.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
He didn't really know English, and for the first couple of films he made, including Dracula while he was on Broadway, the rumor is that he learned his lines phonetically, and so the only English he knew were the lines to Dracula and the other films he was doing.
He lived Dracula.
Yeah, he lived Dracula, and there's a podcast I listen to, not that I'm telling you to go elsewhere, but there's a podcast I listen to called You Must Remember This, hosted by Karina Longworth.
So good.
Yeah, and the latest couple episodes have been dedicated to both Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, her new series is. And she's really a fantastic podcast host and fantastic researcher. I will say the latest episode's consistent bashing of Lon Chaney Jr. is a little unnecessary, and we'll get to him later. Okay. But, I was a little turned off by, he had enough problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after Dracula comes Frankenstein, and the main thing happening in the 20s and when these movies are coming out is this is cementing these characters in cultural canon. What Frankenstein looks like is because this movie came out and Frankenstein has the flat top.
Because of Jack Pierce's makeup. Right. Jack Pierce ended up creating a lot of the monster makeup.
Right.
It's very famous. And it's so funny. Gloria Stewart, is that her name? Old woman from Titanic.
Oh, I don't know her name.
Yeah, she's in a lot of the monster movies. She's in The Invisible Man, and she's in the Mystery of the Blue Room, and she did an interview not too long before she died about talking about Jack Pierce, and she was like, he wasn't a friendly man, but he was really good at his job. That's awesome. He expected you to show up on time and waited. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so when you think about Dracula and the big cape and how everything this looks and all that lore, it's coming from these movies. The Mummy.
Yeah. Literally the Mummy. That's one of the Mummy series was actually one of my blind spots before we did this. And actually, like, after the first Mummy movie, everything that we think pop culturally about mummies, it comes from, like, the second Mummy movie.
Right. Yeah. After those, so the Mummy was actually in the 30s.
Was 32. It was the next year.
Right. And then a trilogy of films based on Edgar Allan Poe, tales, came out. And also, like, these actors, they were, like, part of the Universal family. Like, so you see Bela Lugosi, what's his name? Boris Karloff, in a lot of these movies as these characters, but then also as other characters in these different monster movies. So it's kind of like cool. Like they have like that look and that they can emote through like these kind of like really dense characters. Like well, if you think about Frankenstein, he's wearing all this fucking makeup and he's like kind of bumbling around.
Right.
Like,
well, one of the most famous like things about the like supposed Karloff Lugosi rivalry, which has definitely been overplayed over the years, and part of that is because of the movie Ed Wood. Frankenstein was offered to Lugosi, and he really wanted to play the doctor. He was not interested in the monster because he quote unquote did not believe that the monster was a romantic role. And once Karloff took the role, it like skyrocketed him to fame. But it's so funny because you watch the original Frankenstein and it says like the monster and there's like a question mark.
Yeah.
And then the next film that they do together, Boris Karloff, because he'd become such a success, is only billed as Karloff. Like he's not even, and it's so funny to like see the sort of like career path perhaps Bela Lugosi could have had. I don't know if he necessarily would have, but like he could have maybe moved it more towards into the Karloff realm.
From what I, like the little research I did do, he talks about, or the sense that I got was that he thought he was going to have a specific kind of a career that was not necessarily going to exist just in this monster universe. And unfortunately for him, he ended up getting typecast and could not break out of that. And I think he wanted to like be a more romantic leading man.
It is funny because Karloff's first breakout role was a makeup role. It didn't pin him to only be the monster. You know?
The picture was handed to an up-and-coming English director, James Whale. He needed to find a monster fast.
Sitting in the Universal canteen one day, Whale spotted a fellow diner and beckoned him over. "Your face," he said, "has startling possibilities."
The owner of that face was another expat Englishman whose birth name was William Henry Pratt. Pratt's distinctive features owed something to Indian blood in his family. After more than 2 decades of theatre work and bit parts in films, he'd become resigned to never having a major role. His stage name was Boris Karloff.
It was my father's 81st film, and no one had seen the first 80, essentially. So after 20 years in the business, my father became an overnight success.
Millions of sequels and like this franchise of these movies started coming out. There's Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula's Daughter, all sorts of things that came out after the Edgar Allan Poe movies. And then it wasn't until was it the 40s that Wolfman comes out?
Yeah, the Wolfman comes out in the 40s.
And they had previously done a werewolf movie.
of London. Yeah.
Which was not as well received or
which is funny because apparently the critical consensus nowadays seems to be that it like people come around on it. But I gotta say, movie's pretty boring. I'll be perfectly honest.
The Wolfman came out in 41, and this was the first story that they kind of wrote from nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the other things were like legends and like old...
Or novels like Dracula and Frankenstein.
Right. And the Wolfman, they kind of just like came up with scratch. And so it's funny to think that they, like, even now when you think about werewolves and like the whole Silver Bullet and the Howling at the Moon and all that shit, like this is stuff that Universal and their team built from the ground up. So that's kind of insane. And in 43, they did a remake of Phantom of the Opera.
Yes, starring Claude Rains.
And, like, I don't know how much more we want to... I mean, the amount of mummy movies coming out at this time... Oh, did I miss Invisible Man?
Yes, yeah, you didn't mention, which is also Claude Rains. But like, yeah, that's another good.
The Invisible Man. I watched Invisible Man, and I tried to watch. Like, just, like, get the main ones out of the way. I did not watch, like, every sequel. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna watch, like, the fucking fourth Frankenstein movie. I gotta move on to, like, Wolfman.
The fourth is a good place to stop, if you ask me, anyways, for that one. But,
The Invisible Man is, like, the only monster movie where, like, the monster is just, like, a dick. Mm-hmm. He's just a bad guy. Like,
I mean, it's the drug, first of all. It's the,
right.
But,
but he's like, imagine the power.
I shall offer my secret to the world with all its terrible power. The nations of the world will bid for it, thousands, millions. The nation that wins my secret can sweep the world with invisible armies.
Jack, I want you to let my father help you. You know how clever he is. He'll work with you day and night until you find that second secret, the one that'll bring you back to us. Then we'll have those lovely, peaceful days again, out under the trees, after your work in the evening.
Your father? Clever? You think he can help me? He's got the brain of a tapeworm, a maggot, beside mine. Don't you see what it means? Power. Power to rule, to make the world grovel at my feet.
That movie, the technological wonder. I'm watching this movie and I'm like, how did they do this?
And it doesn't necessarily hold up between the next, I saw a bunch of the sequels. I saw Invisible Agent and Invisible Man Returns and Invisible Woman, and especially in Invisible Woman, like, the technology is not up there. And I think it's because they were trying to do it as cheap as,
that was, around the 40s is when, like, just like a glut of these movies started coming out.
Right.
And I think the movie industry also was changing.
Yeah.
Now, like, there was, a lot of, I think their more interesting and better stuff was pre-code.
Yeah.
And then, the industry starts changing and there's more and more, studios putting out more and more stuff. This King Kong also comes around this time, which was put out by RKO.
Yeah.
Which is our competitor. And, that kind of, like, reinvigorated the entire genre. And so I think Universal, tried to kind of, like, catch up.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. And then the 50s comes around, and that's sort of like, I feel like that's
the tail end.
Yeah,
right?
that's when the nail starts going in the coffin, because this actually starts more towards 48, but, like, you start getting the Abbott and Costello movies, which, by the way, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is a fantastic movie.
Okay, noted.
But, like, it starts to become more of a joke. It's not necessarily about scaring people and whatnot, and then you finally get to The Creature in the Black Lagoon in 54. And he's really the tail end of your monster films, because then they sort of move into, science fiction.
There's a lot of, like, UFO alien stuff going on.
And, like, admittedly, like, people love The Mole Man and people love This Island Earth. And I think This Island Earth is a really great movie. I will stake silent on the mole people. And, but yeah, it's really, like, it really sort of ends in the 50s. There's one movie that was made in 1960, The Leech Woman, and, like...
That sounds awful.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Meanwhile, the world had entered an atomic age. Hollywood responded with a new set of terrors, science fiction monsters that would be defeated by scientists and soldiers, not with a stake or a silver bullet.
By the early 1950s, horror cinema was pretty much extinct after barely 2 decades.
This very short version wraps up just by saying that their legacy is just,
I mean, it's pop culture itself. Like,
literally.
Yeah. Like, the image of Dracula in the cape with the widow's peak, like, with the very Hungarian accent.
Right.
And, like,
is, like, Bela Lugosi, like, is the person that, like, invented all of this. And when you see... And it's funny, like, that movie specifically is, like, I thought it was okay. I thought the atmosphere was amazing, though. Like, if you just, like, it's a kind of, like, half silent.
It's very quiet. It's one of those things you don't expect from it. It's one of the things people don't talk about. There's little to no score. In fact, I don't think there is a score.
No, in that movie, there's, like, music always playing. Oh. It's like a violin, like, kind of like...
I think you saw the Philip Glass score. Yeah, so there was a score written later on by Philip Glass to be played over it, because the movie is essentially almost a silent film except for with dialogue, and so it's easy to put a score on that film. And the main version of Dracula is like super duper quiet.
I had no idea, and I liked the music. I thought it was like really creepy and weird. Like it's literally just like a violin and kind of like.
Yeah, I think you saw the Philip Glass version. Interesting.
That's cool.
I mean, it's out there. It's not like, I mean, Universal even has it. I have a Blu-ray set to Louie's right now, and like it's on the Blu-ray. So,
and thinking about Frankenstein, the way he looks and acts. Thinking about like all the spoofs that have been done, like, and even like these kitty movies that come out, like Hotel Transylvania, whatever, like all that stuff. Like all those monsters look and act. Like the Count from Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Like, that is pure, taking from these Universal monsters.
And they influence so many things that even like, the Hammer films, which maybe someday we'll do Hammer, but that's also a huge undertaking. Hammer were these, films that started in the 50s, and they were a British film company, and they essentially started making, their decision was that we're gonna remake the Universal Studios monster movies without Universal's permission, and eventually they got a licensing deal with Universal so they could make their monsters look like them. But like, that's the Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, like Dracula's Risen from the Grave, and like the funny thing about that is that they are clearly influenced by it's like these Universal Studios things that have come before, but they can't say that.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, it's wild, and that's kind of, we'll get into this in the fast forward later, but that's kind of like why Universal's like, oh, we have all this property that like is a known thing, like we need to like start doing some reboots and all that mess.
Yeah, when we get into the fast forward, I have a couple questions about like the earlier stuff, but I want to save it for them because it's more forward thinking, I feel like. But so since you have a very brief history, and we didn't even talk about some of the filmmakers, but we can probably touch on that a little bit later. Why don't we move into our
picks? Let's do our 1-star reviews.
Awesome.
It was hard for me to choose, and I tried to watch, a good amount of the movies. I really didn't watch any of the sequels except for Bride of Frankenstein because that is such a popular...
You really should have watched Dracula's Daughter. You really should have. But
you really don't need to tell me what to do.
You didn't hear him hit me.
This is an abusive relationship, Gavin. But it was pretty clear to me, and a lot of them kind of feel the same, but my least favorite movie has to go to Creature from the Black Lagoon. And there was nothing like that I hated about, like, I was going to pick, what's it called? Captive Woman, Wild Woman.
Yeah. So can we talk about that just real briefly?
Sure.
By the way, there's a Universal Studios monster that no one talks about. And that's the Jungle Woman, who is played, first of all...
Who is played by Aquanetta.
Which, drag queens...
Amazing.
If there's not a drag queen out there that has not taken Aquanetta yet, like, what the fuck are you doing?
What's it called? It's Wild Woman.
It's the...
Captive...
Paula the Ape Woman / Gorilla Girl is the character. Yeah, and it's... Her films are not the most PC of the films, I will say.
It's called Captive Wild Woman.
Captive Wild Woman. But... This is a character, like, this is the only female Universal Studios monster, and no one talks about her. She's, like, literally a forgotten...
I don't think the movie is very good.
I don't think it's very good either.
And I think it must be very hard, especially now, to revisit this specific monster and how she is a monster. And, like, I mean, essentially her whole deal is... she's a scientist who, like, is really into, like, glands.
Yeah.
And thinks, like, he can, like, make people and help literally everything by fucking with your glands. He, like, finds an ape and then fucks, and this girl, oh my god, this movie's crazy, I just remembered. There's, like, a girl whose glands are insane, and, and really, they're not insane, she's just, like, a hormonal lady.
Yeah.
But, like, because she's a hormonal lady in the 50s.
I once again mentioned that this is not a PC film by any means.
Like, in the 50s, he decides, like, he's gonna, like, take her glandular stuff and put it into the ape and then turn her into a woman. And he does. And she, like, helps this guy, do circus things with like lions and tigers and shit. But then she sees him kiss another woman and she goes crazy and turns back into an ape. Yeah, it's really fucking weird. It's really fucking weird. And watching that movie was very hard because I felt really bad because I know that they were fucking with those animals in a very aggressive and uncool way.
Yeah.
Like, it was disgusting to watch. And so, like I said, that movie was almost gonna be my pick.
I would not have blamed you.
But
Creature. Go on.
But, and like I was reading, I looked up and everyone loves Creature of the Black Lagoon and I was like, fuck, why am I a dum-dum? The reason why I chose this was
you clearly have reasons. Like, I don't...
Like, nope, just cause. I'll say I chose this instead of Captain Wild Woman because I at least was like, Captain Wild Woman is bonkers.
Yeah.
And was like, very, very silly. And Aquanetta. Aquanetta lover. And also known as the Venezuelan volcano.
Yeah. I could go on and on about Aquanetta. She claimed to be part Arapaho.
Right.
And then others believe that she was actually secretly African American.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Insane.
Yeah.
But I chose Creature of the Black Lagoon because mostly I just thought it was very, very boring. So this movie was made in 1954. It was released in 3D.
Yes.
And,
it is the last original monster of the Universal Monsters canon.
Right. And there was actually 2 creatures that were played. The 2 people that played the creature.
Oh, I was like, there's 3 films,
There's
Louie.
3 films, yeah. But Ben Chapman played, the creature on land and Rickon Browning played him underwater. And like, I read that they're like very, different sized men. One of them is very tall. And they also had to like get different suits. Like one suit in the water was lighter so it could like be filmed, and like be seen. It was directed by Jake Arnold. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And when I first watched this movie, it's about like some doctors, I guess, and they're in
doctors, I guess. I like that.
Scientists, perhaps. This movie, like, they're just like spouting off all these things that sound sciencey, and I don't believe them because it sounds so fucking like weird. They say like, they essentially find this big fucking hand that looks like the Gill Man.
Yeah.
And
they think he's a missing link.
Right. And they're like, oh, this is from the Devonian era. And I was like, what the fuck is that? That sounds fake. And I looked it up and it's not!
It's real. Yeah.
It's very real.
I have never seen anything like this before.
It's important?
Yes, I think it is. Very important. We will take one more picture. Then we will dig it out.
And also, it is known as the Age of Fish. And I was like, oh my god. Someone was like, guys, there's an Age of Fish.
My face is so warm right now. Keep going, Louie.
It was... Oh, it's a kind of fun like story about how they made this movie. William Allen produced it after he like heard a story from this like Mexican cinematographer at this like Citizen Kane like filming party, and 10 years later he like wrote it down, and then like they kept rewriting it and finally made the movie. I don't know. I think I read something that it was supposed to be like this Beauty and the Beast thing, and for me, most of it felt like they were just like kind of showing off that they had the technology to shoot underwater. I think the creature looks cool. I don't think he's very like emotive. Like it's hard, like as opposed to like Frankenstein, where I can like I feel for him. I get it.
Right.
In this thing, I'm like, wait, he's just.
I was gonna say he does do. There are a lot of close-ups of him just going like,
right, opening his mouth and like kind of running around. In this movie, also, there's like a bunch of. They're like, I don't. Gavin, this movie. It
just doesn't do it for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's like not really a lot of tension. I don't think like.
Listen, if I'm gonna continue to get shit for picking the witch last week, I'm not defending you on the creature, but.
If in Bride of Frankenstein and like there's like actual heartbreak, you know, like and the whole idea of this monster feeling like an outcast, where Creature, he's supposed to be. I keep calling him Creature. His name's Gilman, right?
Yeah.
The Gill Man.
It's Roy Gilman.
Stupid. Gilman. And I just don't like. I'm like, what is he doing there? What does he want? Like, what the fuck does he want? I don't understand. Like, he sees this woman. I don't know. And
he wants to fuck her.
Right. And
he wants to fertilize her fishy eggs.
Yes. And
is
I'm
that
like,
not what?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. But I'm like, okay, cool, I guess. And like he's kind of, and they're hunting him now. I'm like, why don't they just run away? I will say everyone in that movie is very attractive.
Yeah. It plays really well in 3D as well.
And I mean, and some of the shots were really beautiful, but like I was like, this is a long shot of me just watching him like in the water swimming around. So yeah, of the movies, I just thought this was the most like ineffective.
So if I had to pick, I mean, first of all, I really wish I could give it to every Mummy sequel. Like, I literally, after the first Mummy, and they wrote themselves in a corner, but the first Mummy is essentially just a remake of Dracula, but with a mummy instead of a vampire.
Great.
And Boris Karloff plays the mummy, Imhotep, and he wants to
Boris Karloff, who's also Frankenstein.
Yeah, who's also Frankenstein. And so in the second movie, they introduce a new mummy named Karis, who like...
I thought you were going to say Karen.
Yeah, named Karen from Finance.
Fucking Karen from Finance. The mummy.
Exactly. Karen from Egypt. And Karis, fell in love with a woman, and then, she died, and in his grief, he stole some, fucking leaves, and like, the leaves become the most important things for the next 5 sequels.
3 of the leaves will make enough fluid to keep Carrie's heart beating. Once each night, during the cycle of the full moon, you will dissolve 3 ton of leaves and give the fluid to Carris. Children of the night, they howl about the hill of the 7 jackals when Carris must be fed.
Lon Chaney Jr. takes over the role in the second sequel.
Lon Chaney Jr., who was also the Wolfman?
Who's also the Wolfman. And, like, it just, like, it gets worse and worse as it goes along, except for the fact that, like, some of the characters that are introduced get killed off immediately in the next one, in the third one, and that made me really happy because I hated them.
Good.
But yeah, they're just more and more ridiculous and awful as it goes along. And also the timeline's really fucked up because, like, the second movie takes place in 1940, the year it came out, but then the third movie takes place 30 years later, and then the fourth movie is like 2 more years, and then the fifth movie is 25 more years, making it set in 1997. But they didn't just like update any, like, so it's like, oh yeah, no, the 40s just lasted forever.
Right.
But yeah, but I'm not going to give that crown to them because that would be rude of me to give it to an entire series of movies. I want to give it to a Boris Karloff starring film from 1944 called The Climax.
The Climax?
The Climax. The credits say it's based off a play by the same name by Edward Locke, even though it has nothing to do with that play. To make matters even worse, it was written as a sequel to their remake of Phantom of the Opera starring Claude Rains, and then they suddenly decided, no.
Wait. So it was originally made to be a sequel to the Phantom of the Opera?
Yes.
And then they finished it and were like,
no, they didn't finish. They went into production and were like, no.
Okay.
So this is directed.
They're like, guys, lose the mask.
Yeah, exactly. So this was written by George Wagner, and the plot is, very simply, opera's house physician, as one is wont to have, at the Vienna Royal Theatre, by the name of Dr. Horner, murders his fiancée, a prima donna, out of obsession and jealousy. 10 years later, he hears another young singer, played by Susanna Foster, who was in Phantom of the Opera, but she's not playing the same character, even though she was the female lead in that.
Okay.
Who reminds him of the late diva, and he's determined to make her sing only for him, even if it means silencing her forever. That description sounds better than the movie is. I actually, for some reason, like the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera. I think he's a particularly compelling Phantom. I don't think the script's fully there, but it does have problems, but it's not that bad. So The Climax is 100% an excuse to do a musical with, like, a angry-looking Boris Karloff. No one dies in the film except for the fiancé in a flashback at the beginning.
Is he a monster in this movie?
He's evil.
He's an evil man.
Yeah, who killed his fiancé. So, like, he is absolutely bad, but, like...
That's not good.
It's not good. He hypnotizes the diva into not singing, and then everybody figures it out. And when they do, and he's like, well, I'm gonna kill her, they chase him back to his home, and you find out he's been keeping the body of his dead wife in a room, and then he accidentally knocks down a candle, and he burns to death. But the performance goes really well, guys.
Thank
and that's
God.
the end of the movie. This movie is nothing. There's no dramatic arcs in anything. No one's particularly that interesting. And even Boris Karloff, who perhaps has the most fascinating eyes in film history, like, in terms of being a villain. Like, even his stare is not good enough to, like, keep you interested. The other thing, Turin Bey is the love interest of the young of Susanna Foster in the film. And Turin Bey is also in the Mummy movies. And he's an interesting actor. I don't think I like him very much. He's like, he's adorable. He's really adorable.
Sweetie, you're so cute.
Yeah, exactly. But he really relies on those looks a lot.
And relying on that body.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been meaning to watch this film forever, and I used this as an excuse to finally watch it. And let me tell you, I was disappointed.
Right. So he wants to get the diva to only sing for him?
Well, that's what's weird. Okay, I guess this description's a little, because he doesn't really want her to sing at all. So he, like, brings her back to his study, and he is like, all like, oh, I'm gonna hypnotize her.
Rest, my dear, gently slipping away into another world. A world of my design, where you will be helpless without me. Tonight you give your voice and your will to me.
So when she, like, goes to sing this note, she suddenly realizes she can't sing anymore. And that keeps happening to her, and they finally realize that he has, like, hypnotized her. And what's even weirder is he has a servant, who was the prima donna's servant, and she stayed silent. She knows he killed his wife, but can't prove it, even though she lives in the house where he's keeping the dead body and never thought to, like, pick the lock or anything. Right. And she's just been waiting for 10 years for someone to come along and figure it out. And why? He must pay really well.
I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. I was really surprised at how not good it was, especially since, because I find the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera to be really lush, and I think that's one of the things I liked about it is the impeccable design in it, and Claude Rains is a very sympathetic lead. The other thing is, I really like Boris Karloff, and as you mentioned in Frankenstein, he's very sympathetic.
Yeah.
He's not in this. He's playing the one note, I am evil, I am evil, I am evil. So, it's the most weakly drawn of any of the movies, and, as we mentioned before, there's many categories of their monster films. We've mostly stuck to the monster films. I did go out of my way and watch a couple of the Boris Karloff.
I mean, I tried, and again, like, so my choice for my least favorite, I was like, I want to, like, make sure and at least cover my bases for the classics. And if I watched, like, a couple of things that were, like, not, the Wolfman and Dracula and stuff. But yeah, from the classics, like, if you're going to talk about, like, the monsters, I thought kind of the same thing. I don't know what the fuck the Gilman wants in life.
Right. And that's kind of why I felt comfortable choosing Climax after savaging the Mummy films. Is because it really was intended to be part of the main, and even though it's not, considered part of that canon, it really is supposed to be a Phantom of the Opera film. I'm curious as to what they would have done with it, as a Phantom of the Opera film. But yeah.
I wonder what made them be like, never mind.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, they could have, a lot of the characters survived. There's a very weird, I mean, as I've said, the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera is not without fault. There's a very weird, like, subplot with, like, a love triangle, and it clearly seems like at the end that it's like, oh, they're in a throuple now. Duh. She didn't choose.
Right.
She was just like, you guys are gonna kiss every now and then. I'm gonna watch.
I need to watch that. I did not watch that, but now I'm interested.
Yeah. But I guess that would bring us to our 5-star reviews.
So I also had a little bit of a hard time choosing because there's a lot of good movies.
There's a lot of really good movies.
Frankenstein is very, very good.
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein is also very, very good. I even like Dracula, even though it's kind of fucking weird, but, like, it just, like, is so engrossing.
Well, and that's one of the things I kind of want to, I'll save it again for the fast forward, but I'm curious as to what, like, there's some very specific reasons those films are good.
Right. And, I was very close to choosing The Wolfman, actually, just because I thought it was, like, really cool. I like the whole idea of, like, essentially, it's like any man can, like, be an evil man.
Take that, Karina Longworth, who thinks that Lon Chaney Jr. is a complete bore. Anyways.
I don't know what the fuck just happened. But my pick actually goes to The Black Cat.
Really?
Yeah.
I do fucking love the Black Cat.
1934 is the Black Cat. So the Black Cat is good for a lot of reasons, but it mostly is very good because it's the first movie where they pair Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff together.
Yes.
And they are playing neither Frankenstein nor Dracula. It was their biggest box office hit of the year.
Oh.
So good for them.
That's a fact I did not know, so hey.
So we open up with this movie is about these two newlyweds who are on a train trying to go to Hungary, I think, or
yes, yeah,
Turkey or something. And there's a mix-up, so they have to share their train compartment with a doctor, Vitus Wadergast.
That sounds right. That sounds good.
It's
I won't shame you.
Yeah, it's Bela Lugosi, and he's a psychiatrist, and he's who was at war, and he lost his wife, and he's kind of telling them what the fuck's he's up to, and he's going to go see an old friend, which is Boris Karloff's character, Halmar Polzig.
Yeah, that's good. That's right. Okay. I know that one's right.
Okay. He and in Austria, I think.
Yes.
So they're on a bus sharing it to go to a place. The bus crashes because it's raining and shit. And
like it is tonight.
And the wife character, she's injured, so they take her to Polzig's fucking castle.
Yeah.
Compound.
As one has.
Right. And then she gets fucking weird. First of all, Polzig looks like a crazy, crazy person.
One of the best hairstyles.
That hair is insane.
Yeah.
And it's weird because in this movie, both of them, Polzig and Weidergast, they both kind of seem like spooky, scary, evil dudes. Neither of them, are particularly, you're oh, I'm rooting for this guy because he seems, they both, in my opinion, I was I am scared of both of you, and you are weird, and these couple is just hanging around kind of when can we leave now? And the doctor gives the wife some crazy drugs, and she starts acting real fucking weird. Essentially, Polzig is the devil, and he's in charge of this fucking satanic cult, and has been collecting ladies and has them in stasis in his fucking chamber of doom. And essentially it's these two kind of mad scientist characters at war with each other, and Polzig wants to sacrifice the wife, and the other Weidergast is no, don't, where's my wife, you lost her. Turns out his daughter's there, and Polzig's been keeping her there captive.
Where is my wife Karen and my daughter?
Karen? Well, what do you mean?
Where is she? Come this way.
Peter, where is he?
Never mind him. But you will be dead soon if you don't come with me quickly.
And Karen?
Karen is dead.
No! I mean Karen, your daughter. Madame Polzig.
What do you mean?
She's alive. Here in this house. She's Polzig's wife.
It ends in a crazy, crazy fucking scene where Weidergast chains up Polzig and skins him alive.
Yeah, he's gonna flay him. It
is super wild.
It's super dark for that time period.
Yeah, and this is pre-code, and and this movie, I didn't know who the fuck these characters were. There was no Mummy or Dracula character. I was just so drawn in though. Again, a super engrossing movie with these original characters, or not original because this is based off of Edgar Allan Poe.
But it's really not. Because the Edgar Allan Poe story is about a man who murders his wife and walls her up, and then keeps hearing a cat meowing because he accidentally walled the cat up with the wife, and the cat's been eating the body to stay alive.
Right, I forgot that the Weidergast is scared of cats. He's ah! He freaks out, and Polzig is carrying them around everywhere essentially.
The funny thing about the women in stasis scene, what I would have been led to believe, from some of the things I've read is that, even though it was pre-code, they were told that the wife being in stasis was too much for audiences, and they asked, Edgar G. Ulmer, who directed, to remove that scene from the film, and Universal Studios even ponied up the money for him to reshoot, and in his reshoots instead, what he did is shoot the scene where there's an entire hallway of women in stasis.
Right.
And so, and put that in the movie, and they were like, fuck, I guess we just gotta put it out.
Right. I mean, and it's very striking visually, they don't show him skinning him alive, but he is
sometimes the implication's worse.
Yeah, and he looks like he's being crucified. His arms are stretched out, and you see the shadow up against the wall. And Lugosi's performance is just incredible, where he's just telling out, "I'm going to skin you alive." It's insane.
They're incredibly electric on screen together, and that's one of the things that people don't often talk about enough. And they end up doing many films together. I watched The Invisible Ray, which is perhaps not a great film, but like they're magnetic when they're together.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I tweeted it out, and our friend Keith Walker, who listens to the show, says like, yeah, Bela Lugosi always makes a good sidekick. And I don't think that's fair. Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's fair. I just think, clearly Karloff is, I think, even history agrees with this. Karloff is the better actor, but I think there's something really charismatic when you put those two together.
So Gavin, what was your favorite?
So my favorite would have to be then, and I'm actually so glad you didn't pick it. I'm just really glad you picked Black Cat, because I do love the Black Cat. But is Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I think Bride of Frankenstein is really the masterpiece. And this is sort of what, I've been trying to get at when we're talking about these films is I think, one of the things that makes some of the earlier ones so striking and strong is the directors and the directorial intent behind the decisions. I don't think you get as a pop culturally long-lasting Dracula without Todd Browning in the director's chair. And admittedly, like, there is the Spanish Dracula, which was filmed at the same time, which is actually a genuinely better movie.
Yeah. For a few years, at the dawn of talkies, Hollywood was producing simultaneous foreign language versions of its domestic product. Some of these were in French, some of them were in German, most of them were in Spanish. And Paul Kohner had the opportunity to do the Spanish version of Dracula, and he decided to upstage Todd Browning's effort. The result is a film that, unlike many of these foreign versions, which are very forgettable today, is actually superior on most technical levels to the Todd Browning film. There's this myth that the camera, in 1930 in Hollywood was, immobilized behind these sound boxes, and it really was not the case. And there's a tremendous fluidity of camera movement in the Spanish Dracula, especially one shot where Dracula first appears, where a huge crane was used to kind of sweep up the steps from the bottom, from Renfield's point of view, to Dracula's full figure, standing there holding the candle. It's really a stunning moment. Browning does very little with it. In the film, Dracula is just kind of seen plodding down the stairs.
But a lot of that atmosphere and everything still comes from the Todd Browning version. Same thing with Frankenstein. You get a lot of the stuff, and a lot of it comes from James Whale.
Yeah.
I have this biography of James Whale that's right next to me right now. He went on to direct The Invisible Man, as well as doing the first two Frankenstein films.
And he didn't want to do Bride of Frankenstein, right?
No, he absolutely didn't. He didn't really want to tread the same water, Right. And I don't blame him for that. Clearly doing something like The Invisible Man is like, it's a challenge. It's
a bonkers.
Universal had determined they were going to make a sequel all the way back to the preview screenings of the first movie. And that's why they changed the original ending so Henry Frankenstein would survive. James Whale refused because he thought, as I mentioned, the ideas had been squeezed dry. And so he eventually decided to come back because he leveraged making this movie he wanted to make called One More River, with there was like, I'll make this movie for you, let me make this other movie. So screenwriter Robert Florey wrote a treatment entitled The New Adventures of Frankenstein, The Monster Lives, but it was rejected without comment early in 1932.
Without comment?
Yeah.
No.
Exactly. There's so many different, versions of the script that came out. I want to say there's at least 4, but the final script combining elements of a number of these versions was submitted for the Hays Office Review in November 1934. So we're already at the Hays Code. So we're no longer pre-code.
Right.
And sources report Bela Lugosi and Claude Rains were considered with varying degrees of seriousness for the role of Frankenstein's mentor, Pretorius. Other reports that the role was created specifically for Ernest Thesiger. Thesiger? I never know how to say his name. I really like him, though. The early in production, Whale decided that the same actress cast to play the bride should also play Mary Shelley in the film's prologue to represent how the story and horror in general springs from the dark side of the imagination. He considered Bridget Helm and Phyllis Brooks before deciding on Elsa Lanchester, who was mentioned in last week's episode. Lanchester...
Oh, that's right. I forgot they have this entire, prologue.
Yeah.
And they're, milking every word.
Oh my God.
It is crazy.
Elsa Lanchester is having the fucking time of her life. And she was a child at that point. She was not old.
And those two gays?
Oh, yeah.
How beautifully dramatic. The crudest, savage exhibition of nature at her worst without, and we three. We elegant three within. I should like to think that an irate Jehovah was pointing those arrows of lightning directly at my head, the unbowed head of George Gordon Lord Byron, England's greatest sinner. But I cannot flatter myself to that extent. Possibly those thunders of our dear Shelley, heaven's applause for England's greatest poet.
What of my Mary?
She is an angel.
You think so?
Like every syllable is just like insane coming out of their mouth.
And that's the thing I sort of want to get at. But anyways, everybody really knows the story of Bride of Frankenstein. The story of Bride of Frankenstein is...
It's kind of like he's like maybe learned his lesson, right?
Yeah, the doctor's
like,
learned his lesson, but a mentor of his comes back and is like, listen, we're going to create life, but he's like super gaying it up.
He's so gay.
And like, he comes and is like, listen, I need you to create life. I've tried myself. All I've got is these miniature things, which is my favorite part of the movie.
Right. So it's like he's like a crazy, like, he's like, surprise, another crazy doctor character.
Yeah,
but like,
Dr. Pretorius.
And he does like different crazy though.
Yeah.
And he's like, he makes people, but miniature people. He's
right.
I can only make them small, but I want to make a big one. And also,
you find out the monster's alive, and the monster's all like, I want somebody to fucking like me.
Right. He's like,
and not even, that's the crux is, the Bride of Frankenstein's a little misleading because the monster's not really, it's not like the creature from the Black Lagoon. He's not interested in getting somebody that he can fuck with. He just wants a friend.
Yeah.
Because if you've seen the first movie, you know how that ends. Mm-hmm. He's picking flowers with a girl one minute, he's throwing a river in the next.
Yeah.
So he wants somebody who understands him. So Kismet, Pretorius is like, see, even he wants you to create life again. Mm-hmm. So they go about doing it. They create a female monster. Things do not go well.
She looks great though.
She looks fantastic. She's really, talking about being able to beat a face.
Right. And it's like, I didn't know anything about this movie coming in and watching it. And so I did not know that the Bride of Frankenstein is in it for like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And her only line is, all she does is look at Frankenstein and yell at him.
And so things do not go well. The monster gets its famous line of "We belong dead," and he kills them. He blows up the tower. Correct?
Yeah, he blows up the tower. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Does he? Yeah, Pretorius definitely dies.
Yeah.
I want to say, the doctor though escapes.
He does escape. He does not come back for the next movie, which I also particularly like, which is, Son of Frankenstein, which if you've seen Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein,
it's basically that.
It's that movie. And it's so funny because like he really did a straight up parody of that movie. And in that movie, it's Basil Rathbone. He's the son. I just really I think there's a lot of emotion in Bride of Frankenstein. I think there's a lot of beauty in Bride of Frankenstein, and it's just really an extremely gay movie. And it's interesting because the other thing is Dr. Pretorius is allowed to be sort of such a loud, Queenie type character. Also because Colin Clive wasn't in the best of health. But when Colin Clive plays Dr. Frankenstein, and when they made the first movie, Whale had some trepidation about him, even though they were friends, because he was an alcoholic. And by the time that they made Bride of Frankenstein, he was really succumbing to his alcoholism. And it was an issue on the set. So it sort of allowed him to sort of play up these other characters and really get the performance. Like, Colin Clive was actually considering not coming back for the film.
Wow.
But I just really, one of the things, it's a visually very stunning film, but also I was talking about this with someone earlier this week. There's no non-queer reading of this.
Right.
James Whale was a gay man in a time in which you could not be a gay man. He slept with men. It was no secret.
Right.
And there's a really beautiful film called Gods and Monsters, if you've not seen it, starring Ian McKellen as James Whale. That's all about his later life. He falls in love with Brendan Fraser, who's shirtless throughout most of the movie. And yeah,
Take me there.
It's young Brendan Fraser too, so it's real nice. But
that's on my things to do list.
Yeah, exactly. I can let you borrow it before you go.
Okay,
but it's a really fantastic movie. I highly recommend that. And I also love the way that Whale sort of played around with the things that he was allowed and wasn't allowed to do. In the original Frankenstein, there's this prologue of the film, which is a man coming out and warning you that, it's going to be scary, and it's very tongue-in-cheek, and it's very camp. And so this movie, as you mentioned, they bookend it with Mary Shelley telling the story of Frankenstein, and it is, once again, a very camp.
Super camp.
And that's one of the things is I feel like Whale, because he ended up having so much control of this film.
Yeah.
He was allowed to put something very personal of himself into that. And it shines through. And I don't know. Do
you think, like, when you say that, do you think, like, the monster is like...
Oh, yeah. There's definitely a quality. I mean, there's a really great exchange, between... I mean, there's so many really good lines from Dr. Pretorius himself. He says at one point, follow the lead of nature or of God if you like your Bible stories, male and female created to them. Be fruitful and multiply. Create a race, a man-made race upon the face of the earth. Why not? And it's this so cavalier sort of like we're two men and we can make something together, that sort of, also there's this great exchange he has with the monster that's very tongue-in-cheek.
Do you know who Henry Frankenstein is and who you are?
Yes, I know. Made me from dead. I love dead. Hate living.
You're wise in your generation. We must have a long talk, and then I have an important call to make.
And I just love how cavalier and how, like...
Pretorius is, like... He's Scar.
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't seen this movie before, it's like, and you're thinking about, like, what do you mean when we say, like, gay campy? Like, he very much is in the vein of Scar, or, I'm sure Scar was maybe based on him, and, like, a long line of, like, gay villains who were just, like, very, like, swishy and, like, devious.
And I like, because of there's a connection between Pretorius and the monster. As you mentioned, like, the monster is sort of the outsider. And I feel like it's very clear that Pretorius, because he's one of the few people who gets along with the monster, I really feel like a lot of that connection is having to do with, Whale feeling like an outsider.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, you don't belong, and all you want is companionship. And, you don't understand why you were made the way you were.
Right.
And Frankenstein has no control over, like, he was dead.
Right. Yeah, and there's plenty of references to that over many of the films where he's basically like, I didn't ask for this,
and his father, quote unquote, like, Dr. Frankenstein, has abandoned him.
Yeah.
He just, like, he's either, like, trying to use him for, like, evil, or, like, he is just like, fuck, I fucked up, bye, whatever, don't care, like, I've moved on. And so, like, what the fuck is the monster supposed to do?
Yeah.
And it's like the most emotionally, like, rich of, I think, the monsters.
Absolutely. I just love Bride of Frankenstein.
But yeah, do you want to move into our fast forward?
I would absolutely love to move into our fast forward. Moving on down the line, as we've mentioned before, Universal realizes that they sort of have this cash cow that they don't really know what to do with.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing. So what they're trying to do now...
Well, wait, before that...
Yeah.
There was the Mummy movies with our friend Brendan Fraser.
Yes, the Mummy movie in the 90s. I really like the first one. I know people like the second one. It's not my cup of tea.
But I don't think I saw the third one.
I never did either. With Maria Bello replacing Rachel Weisz.
Rachel Weisz, yeah.
Yeah. Why?
It was like Chinese dragons or Chinese mummies?
It was like Jet Li's in it, and it's like Tomb of the Dragon Emperor or something like that. Listen, everybody's got to get a paycheck at some point.
Sure.
Oh, I do distinctly remember seeing the second one in the theater and being like, I hate kid actors. I hate this kid because they have a child in that one. Yeah.
Worst. Hate kid actors. You know how I feel about kid actors.
But yeah, so Universal has tried over the years to sort of like bring their monster movies back piecemeal. They started with the Mummy movies in the 90s.
It was kind of like they were like relegated to like rides at Universal Studios.
Yes.
It was like the Mummy Experience, or like, they would have like on Halloween, they would bring them out for their Universal Studios experiences or whatever.
And then they did
The Wolfman?
Well, before they did The Wolfman, Stephen Sommers, who directed the first two, I don't think he did the third. No, he definitely didn't do the third one. Mummy movies, did Van Helsing, which was their next attempt to sort of launch a Universal monster movie. It's
with Wolverine.
Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing, and Dracula's in it, and Frankenstein's monster is in it, and it's a disaster all around.
I remember
Kate Beckinsale's the like female lead.
He has big hair in this movie, right?
Yeah, he has a lot of hair.
Right.
And then they remade Wolfman. Joe Johnston remade Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, which is a very flawed film, though I did see it in the theater. I
did not watch it. It looks boring as fuck.
Yeah, it's really not good. I just also don't like... if there's one thing that you can take away from the Universal Studios monster movies is there's so much you can do with physical effects.
Mm-hmm.
And
you don't need like all this CGI garbage.
Turn these into like CGI fest. Regardless, Wolfman, failure. Their next attempt, Dracula Untold. Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yeah, Dracula Untold was this film that didn't even come out that long ago, 2014, starring Luke Evans as Dracula. Dominic Cooper's in the movie, which is funny because I genuinely believe they're the same person.
Right.
And, and Charles Dance. Charles Dance. And yeah, it was this movie that was set up to be like a new Dracula movie that was going to launch their new franchise. And because that's the other thing you sort of have to understand about the Universal Monster movies is they were sort of the way Marvel makes movies now.
It was only Universal that created a franchise, that created recurring characters, diverse monster characters, and mined them for everything they could get. These kinds of programmers became really the backbone of the studio's income, and without them, Hollywood history would be very different. I mean, where would Americans go for their summer vacations if not to Universal Studios?
So that's really what Universal's trying to do is they're like, we own these monsters, we own this sort of IP of the way Dracula looks and everything.
Right.
And so they did this Dracula movie, Dracula Untold, and they were like, oh, this is going to be a big hit. So they filmed it after the credit sequence, which revealed Dracula was still alive nowadays. And then the movie flopped.
Right.
So they decided, no, they're like, we're going to create a writer's room and we're going to give it another try. And that culminates into 2017's The Mummy starring Tom Cruise.
Garbage.
Yeah, it is really garbage. I have seen it. It's really bad.
What's wild is that they were like, this is going to happen and we're going to tell everyone what's coming.
Yes.
And like, I was like, why are you guys blowing your load on like this movie? Tom Cruise can barely like front a movie anymore. On this like tired property. I was like, I don't know that people really wanted to like re-enter in The Mummy. The Mummy seems like a very weird place to re-enter into.
That's the other thing too, is like, I genuinely don't understand why it's always The Mummy.
It feels like the Brendan Fraser flicks are still kind of like on the consciousness of like general pop culture. And so I know Dracula must just have flopped. I mean, maybe if they would have gone like the Frankenstein route or something, it feels weird.
Yeah. And so, I just want to put this out there, by the way, too, because we were talking earlier, the things that really make the early Universal Studios monster movies is the creative direction driven by the directors.
Totally.
2017's Mummy movie was directed by Alex Kurtzman. This was the first film he's directed.
Oh my god. Who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is like a studio driven thing.
Right.
This was not like an artist doing anything.
He is the co-writer of Michael Bay's The Island, The Legend of Zorro, which is the sequel of Zorro, Mission Impossible 3, Transformers, I'll give him Star Trek in 2009, more Transformers, Cowboys and Aliens, like Star Trek Into Darkness, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is such a piece of shit. Like,
I love Andrew Garfield, though.
Now You See Me 2.
Oh my god, see, they should have left Now You See Me alone.
Yeah. And also, why didn't they just call it Now You See Me Again? Doesn't that make sense? Or Now You Don't? Like, aren't those better names?
I feel like he has a very specific brand of like straight white dude writing.
Yeah.
It's like,
and so they gave him this big budget film, and from the reports, it sounds like Tom Cruise maybe overrid a lot of his decisions anyways, because he's Tom fucking Cruise.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, it's a disaster. It's not a horror movie. It's not an action movie. It's like... And, like, you can do a horror action movie, but this was neither. Right. And,
I remember seeing I didn't watch the movie, but I remember the trailer of The Mummy. They have that girl who's, like, really hot or whatever.
Yeah.
She was in Atomic Blonde.
Yes. Speaking of being really hot. Yeah.
Can't remember her name. But, like, in the trailer, I'm like, oh god, they made this poor girl like get all dressed up as a sexy mummy and they have her chained up, and she's like, I'm a sexy mummy. Like, it looked gross and weird.
Well, also, Tom Cruise just has no chemistry with anyone anymore. Jake Johnson's in the movie. I don't know how they got it. Like, was he really like that bored on hiatus from
New Girl?
Like, and he utters possibly the worst line in film history, which is, dude, and I'm going to spoil this for you guys, by the way. Jake Johnson dies up front, and suddenly he's alive at the end because Tom Cruise has become, like, part mummy. And he's like, dude, thanks for bringing me back to life. Worst line in film history. Probably not in film history, but yeah. Dude, thanks for bringing me back to life.
You slay me.
Yeah. It's a mess, and I know this is the problem, as you mentioned before. This is the start of their quote-unquote dark universe, which is their version of Marvel films, but with monster movies. They even introduced
Dr. Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, played by Russell Crowe. And he leads some arcane group that I cannot remember the name of because it's the most forgettable name, but they're basically S.H.I.E.L.D. and they, like, hunt down monsters. And and so they want to build this franchise universe, and the next film was supposed to be The Invisible Man starring Johnny Depp, but like Johnny Depp's stock's fallen,
right? And God help us.
So
God
now
help Universal.
So now supposedly Bill Condon's Bride of Frankenstein, which Bill Condon directed Gods and Monsters, so you'd think he would have like insight into James Whale, but I'm very nervous.
Right.
But that's supposed to be the next film. But in my humble opinion, Universal should cut their losses, and if they want to try again, but ignore this mummy shit. So what do you want going forward with, I know if they're going to continue to do these, one of the things I love about the Universal Studios monster movies is that they're so slightly nebulous in terms, like, they're so grandiose in their design. Even things like, something like The Invisible Ray, which I watched, which is clearly set contemporary to when it came out, but at the same time doesn't feel like the 30s.
Right.
Or like, the Frankenstein, the first Frankenstein movie is not contemporary to the 30s, but like there's nothing that really feels untimely about it.
Right.
And I like that they do that sort of thing. So like, I think going forward, Universal has to invest themselves into creatives who are willing to build their own universe. I guess one of the things Universal had the advantage of is really coming off of silent films, and a lot of silent films were, not all silent films, but a lot of them were, really influenced by German Expressionism, and they had those really insane large sets.
Yeah. And like the lighting was so like just, they were creating moods.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, now with this mummy shit and Dracula Untold, it's just kind of like very,
it's paint by numbers. It just feels like everything else that has come before.
It's like, do you still like know that there's like things that are happening today that are like old and like shit, dude? Like, it's so fucking tired. And I'm trying to think of like really tense, creepy things, and I'm thinking about like Black Mirror a lot.
Yeah.
And that stuff is like contemporary, but also like they're building their own like world. It feels like, why can't, like, I would love another quiet movie that is really fucking tense and insane, because all these remakes are just fucking loud. They're in your face, and there's no mystery.
Right.
There's no like cutaway and seeing the shadows, and there's nothing left to your imagination about like what creepiness really could happen. It's just all, sexy mummies and like Tom Cruise and like shit blowing up.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be about that. It's, I don't know. I feel like there can be a way to tell, like, imagine the Black Cat now. You know, like, and the weird fucking creepy shit like that. I think The Invisible Man is super fucking creepy. Like,
yeah.
And I remember, what's the Kevin Bacon version of this?
Oh, the
Hollow Man.
The Hollow Man, which is a real piece of shit,
but also very fucking creepy.
Yeah.
Like it is at minimum like meets the creepy bar.
Yeah.
Like, and if they're really gonna, it's weird because I wonder if Universal is really committed to like actually making scary movies.
But I don't think they are, and I think that's really the problem. Right. It's so funny
because they're not gonna make as much money. Like,
right. Well, that's the thing is film studios sort of freaked out when Deadpool came out, and they're like, oh, there's money in rated R horror, rated R superhero movies,
right?
And like maybe that's what Universal needs is they need somebody to make a very classic horror film and make money off of it.
Well, it's like, I mean, so it kind of seems like there's like a horror renaissance happening right now.
Yeah.
With like a lot of, I mean, and I've never seen like the Annabelle creation, whatever. Movies.
Yeah. Don't watch Annabelle. But the ones that spawned
The Conjuring
Annabelle,
and all that stuff
is really
like,
good. Yeah.
They make a lot of fucking money.
Yeah. People love It Follows. I'm not a huge fan, but people love
Right.
it.
And then now with It come, like the remake of It, making a shit ton of money. It feels like we're kind of in a horror like renaissance. At minimum where there's audiences that are like clamoring for it and there's lots of money in there. And so it just seems very weird that Universal would not like lean into that.
Yeah.
With these characters that are supposed to be spooky and creepy, and instead kind of going the like action route and like blockbuster, Michael Bay bullshit. Like, why?
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a weird tact. So I guess, I would hope that they would actually turn more towards horror, like the way that they, or just unease.
It was just like, strip away all the like hundreds of millions of dollars of budget, like make a small movie that is scary as fuck.
That's what actually there was. Jason Blum, who runs Blumhouse Productions, which notoriously do films on the cheap. That actually did The Conjuring and everything. But that they like do these smaller films, but put them out to a large audience in order to make money. Has asked Universal if they could if he could produce one in the sort of dark universe, and I'm more curious about that than I've been about anything else that they've announced.
Yeah,
because maybe that's the route to go.
Maybe also like free themselves from the whole like universe, like we all have to like kind of share together and like bringing in fucking Dr. Jekyll and everyone under the sun. Like, just make one fucking good movie about like the Wolfman, and call it a day. It's kind of like with the whole with DC, like they made one good movie with like Wonder Woman, call it a day. Instead of having to like try and wrangle like everything under the fucking sun. They're just shooting themselves in the foot.
So I guess that wraps up our talk about Universal Studios. If there's anything that we didn't touch on, and trust me, there's a lot of stuff in Universal Monsters that we did not get to. If there's anything that we missed or anything that you want us to go more in depth about, maybe we can revisit this at some point. You can find us online on Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
You can find us on Facebook. Just type in The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
Make sure and go vote for your favorite movie. It'll be up next Wednesday, and you can vote, and hopefully Gavin doesn't lose again because he's such a fucking crybaby.
By the way, we did get a small mention in Time Out New York as America's New York's.
It was like New York's funniest podcast.
Comedy podcast.
And I was
because we're totally a comedy podcast.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I'm comedy.
I am comedy.
Ever heard of it?
We were number 13, which is a very lucky number, I think.
So,
feels
right.
But yeah, you find us on Time Out New York. And we're going to go away and talk about what we're going to do in 2 weeks. So
see you guys later. I hope you guys had a very spooky,
ooky, creepy, and kooky Halloween.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
White on white, translucent black capes, back on the rack. Bela Lugos is dead, the bats have left the bell tower. The victims have been bled, red velvet lines, the black box. Bela Lugos is dead.